This episode includes references to plague, famine, and death in folklore. Listener discretion is advised. Off the northern tip of Scotland lies a scatter of islands called Orkney. Remote, sea-bound, a place where storms rule the horizon and survival has always meant living at the mercy of the sea. The sea is brutal and unrelenting. Winter winds rake the islands, and sometimes the waves themselves bring something ashore. A shape, horse and man fused together, skinless, its veins crawling with dark blood. A rider with arms that drag along the ground, grasping for anything living, and one red eye glowing like a furnace. This is the Nuckelavee, the most feared demon of the Northern Isles. It carries no mercy. It brings plague, famine, disease. And if you meet its gaze, it will not stop hunting you until you cross the one thing it cannot bear: fresh water. I'm Robert Barber, and this is Out of State, a companion series to State of the Unknown. Short journeys into legends beyond America's borders. Stories of folklore, hauntings, and shadows from the other side of the map. Let's step into the dark. In Orkney, life was shaped by the ocean. Fishing, farming, and the fragile balance between them. Storms swallowed boats whole. Salt winds burned crops to dust. Cattle sickened overnight, and there was little defense. To live here was to live at the mercy of forces bigger than yourself. The sea gave, but it also took. And when it took, it left no explanation, only ruin. So people gave that ruin a name. They imagined the sea had a face, not kind, not merciful, but monstrous. And when famine, blight, or plague swept through, they said the same thing every time. The Nuckelavee had walked. Orkney's folklore is older than Scotland itself. The islands were once ruled by Norsemen, their language and sagas braided with Celtic traditions already rooted in the land. The result was a hybrid mythology. Tales of sea spirits, trolls, and draugars, undead beings from the Norse world, mixed with Celtic beliefs in fairies and malevolent forces. The Nuckelavee was born from this mixture. It shared traits with Scandinavian sea monsters, but it became something uniquely Orcadian, a skinless terror, a plague bringer, a creature that seemed to rise directly from the island's hardships. In this world, winter was not just a season, it was an enemy. And with its arrival, people feared something darker moved with it. Orkney was a meeting ground of myth. For centuries, Norse settlers ruled the islands, layering their sagas over Celtic traditions already rooted in the land. The result was a folklore where almost every shadow had a name. There were the Trows, small, twisted creatures blamed for sickness and children. Then there were the Finfolk, shape-shifting beings of the sea who lured fishermen into the waves. And there were whispers of Draugar, undead spirits from Norse legend rising from their graves to torment the living. Each of these creatures reflected a fear, a sick child, a drowned sailor, a grave that would not stay shut. The Nuckelavee was the darkest of them all. Unlike the Trows or the Finfolk, it did not deceive or bargain. Unlike the Draugr, it did not cling to life. It was something worse, a force without reason, the raw face of plague and famine given flesh. For Orcadians, it was the one creature that could not be tricked, bribed, or escaped, only outlasted, only endured. The Nuckelavee is no ordinary spirit. It is a nightmare of flesh and shadow, so grotesque that even speaking of it was said to invite bad luck. Its body was part horse, part man, a human torso fused to a horse's back, with no skin, its muscles and veins exposed, crawling with dark blood. The rider's arms hung so long that they dragged along the ground, fingers scraping stone, snatching at anything living. Its head lolled loosely, and from its face burned one enormous red eye, glowing like fire in the dark. The horse's mouth gaped wide, breath reeking of rot. That breath poisoned crops, wilted fields, and spread plague amongst livestock. Wherever the Nuckelavee passed, death followed. It did not mourn, it did not bargain. It existed only to blight, to rot, to destroy. The Nuckelavee was not free all year. Orkney legend says another spirit held it in chains. The Sea Mither, the mother of the sea, a benevolent power who brought calm waters and gentle summers. But each year, she fought against another force, Tyran, a giant of storms and winter gales. When Sea Mither won, the Nuckelavee was bound beneath the waves, trapped through the bright months. But when Tyran broke her hold, the demon was loose, and winter belonged to it. For the people of Orkney, this was not just myth. It was a cycle they lived. Summer meant survival. Winter meant the Nuckelavee walked. Folklorist Walter Trail Dennison collected the stories in the 19th century, and locals didn't speak of the Nuckelavee as myth. They spoke of it as something seen, something endured. One tale tells of a man named Tomas. He was walking home one night, the sea restless in the dark. As he passed the shore, something rose from the surf. A horse, but not a horse. A red, skinless thing with a man's torso writhing out of its back, and one burning eye fixed on him. The Nuckelavee had come ashore. Tomas ran. The creature followed, its breath scorching the earth, its arms reaching. The ground shook with its steps. He ran until his lungs burned. Ahead, a stream cut across the path. He leapt just as the Nuckelavee closed the distance. The creature shrieked in rage, its claws tearing the soil, but it could not cross the water. Tomas lived, but he never walked the shore at night again. Others told of fields turning black overnight after a strange red glow was seen at sea. Farmers blamed outbreaks of cattle disease on its passing shadow. Fishermen swore the ocean went unnaturally still before it surfaced. And for islanders, those stories weren't just folklore. They echoed real fears. Plagues that struck overnight, famine that left fields bare, disasters so sudden they seemed almost supernatural. The terror of the Nuckelavee wasn't only in stories, it was anchored in life. Records from the 17th and 18th centuries describe waves of cattle disease sweeping the islands. One year, herds died so quickly that families buried animals in pits because there was no time to butcher them. Fields blackened overnight from rot. Boats sank, and entire families vanished at sea. Science offered no explanation, no cure, and in that silence, the legend thrived. The Nuckelavee's breath was said to carry the sickness. Its passing shadow was enough to blight the land. Farmers described red glows over the horizon before disaster struck, what they called the fire eye of the demon burning at sea. When famine hit, no one spoke of chance. They said the Nuckelavee had risen again. And the fear was practical, because in Orkney, survival depended on fragile balance. One good harvest, one safe voyage, one season of health. When the balance collapsed, the demon gave it a face. It gave despair a name. The Nuckelavee had only one weakness: fresh water. It couldn't cross rivers or streams. The moment Tomas leapt the brook, the demon stopped short, bound to the salted sea from which it rose. For islanders, rivers were more than water. They were boundaries, lines between the human world and the inhuman. They were the one barrier no demon could break. And so, charms were carried, prayers were spoken, but none mattered as much as a single stream running cold and clear, because for all its power, the Nuckelavee could not follow where fresh water flowed. The Nuckelavee was more than a monster. It was a vessel for fear itself. Its breath of plague reflected real epidemics. Its blight explained ruined harvests. Its grotesque body mirrored the cruelty of the sea. The same sea that gave life, but also took it away. Unlike the fair folk, it did not bargain. Unlike the banshee, it did not warn. It offered no lesson, no warning, only destruction. And perhaps that is what made it most terrifying, because the Nuckelavee was not vengeance, not justice, not grief. It was cruelty without cause, death without meaning. Why did stories like this last? Because they gave shape to what couldn't be explained. When disease swept through cattle, farmers had no medicine to cure it. When famine struck, there was no science to explain crop failure. But a demon, visible, monstrous, undeniable, gave grief a form. The Nuckelavee is the shadow of survival in harsh places. Not a trickster, not a warning, but the embodiment of dread itself. To name it was to understand it, and to believe that survival meant outrunning it or staying on the right side of the stream. In Orkney, the Nuckelavee is still remembered as the darkest of all demons. Storytellers keep its shape alive, and modern writers describe it in terms closer to nightmare than myth. Lovecraftian, too grotesque to look at directly. It appears in novels, in games, in art. But for Arcadians, it remains something heavier. Even today, children are told not to linger near the sea at night, not to walk the shores alone in winter, because the waves may still hide what once rose from them. And for outsiders, the Nuckelavee may seem like a legend, but for Orkney, it is a memory, a reminder of how fragile survival was, and how easily nature could turn against you. The Nuckelavee is not like the banshee. It does not mourn the dead. It is not like the fair folk. It does not trick or tempt. It carries no meaning. It offers no mercy. It only destroys. And maybe that is why the people of Orkney still speak of it with dread. Because unlike other legends, the Nuckelavee is not a story of grief or lesson. It is the story of a force that cannot be reasoned with, a demon that rises from the sea for no purpose but ruin. And if you see it, you run, and you pray there is a river ahead. This has been Out of State, a companion series from State of the Unknown, short journeys into legends beyond America's borders. If you've been enjoying the show, follow, rate, and share it with someone who can't resist a story that lingers. The Nuckelavee may have belonged to Orkney's shores, but its shape is older than those islands. It is the dread that famine will return, the fear that disease waits just beyond the horizon, and the sense that some forces are cruel simply because they can be. Until next time, remember, not everything that rises from the sea comes to give life. Some come only to take it.